Today I'm talking with Maeve Clark, the Adult Services Coordinator here at the Iowa City Public Library, about the Intellectual Freedom Festival that is happening here at the end of the month. So Maeve, can you give me a little bit of background on the Intellectual Freedom Festival?
Sure, I'd be glad to. So the Iowa City Public Library has had what we call the Carol Spaziani Intellectual Freedom Festival since 1995. And the Freedom Festival is in honor of Carol Spaziani, who worked at the Iowa City Public Library for 26 years. And she was head of various departments and different names, but mostly community services. But the real reason why we have the Intellectual Freedom Festival and name it after her is because she was such a champion of intellectual freedom and people's right to freely congregate, discuss whatever they want. She's just a really strong champion. And so when she retired, we felt that it would be appropriate to do the same kinds of activities we did under Carol's stewardship, but now honor her with that name. Normally we have the Intellectual Freedom Festival sometime at the end of September and into October. We try to have it coincide with Banned Books Week, which is a national event that's part of the American Library Association, the American Publishers Association, a broad group of organizations and associations.
Can you tell me a little bit about what intellectual freedom means and why is it something worthy of an entire festival?
Well, I'm going to read just because I think I could probably articulate what it is, but this is pretty much what Carol used to talk about, what is intellectual freedom. So these are sort of her words. So intellectual freedom is a basic human right defined by Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 1948. And the American Library Association, which is the big sort of governing body and organization that most libraries belong to in the United States, recognizes intellectual freedom as a basis for our democratic system and recognizes the important role libraries play in it. In order for responsible citizens who have the ability to self-govern, we must be well informed. So intellectual freedom for us, and Banned Books Week really talks about how we don't keep information from the public. So you may not agree with something that you read in the library, or you may not agree with a meeting that takes place in the library, but just because you don't agree with it, or your neighbor doesn't agree with it, or you think that that opinion or that work shouldn't be available for everyone else to see, doesn't mean that you can stop it. So it's a basic tenet of our democracy is for people to learn and explore and express. And so that's really what intellectual freedom is, at least here at the Iowa City Public Library.
So what sorts of events and programs do you have planned for this year?
Well, this year we're actually coinciding exactly with Banned Books Week. So Banned Books Week is the week of September 22nd through 28th, so the last week of September. And we have a number of activities. The first one is a computer class. We do classes at the library, and this one we thought fell well into Intellectual Freedom Festival, and it's protecting your privacy, internet safety. So it's a huge issue about internet safety and the NSA and WikiLeaks and what information can be shared and what information can't be shared and who can have access to that information. So we think it's important for the public to know if they want to share, if they don't want to share, how you can protect yourself. I think a lot of adults who are, my age, maybe older, aren't so aware of what you can do when you're on Facebook or what you might be doing when you're on it. Do you want everybody to know everything that you're doing? Do you want your location for everything that you post to be on there? Those kinds of answers to questions, or maybe things that you aren't even aware that you're sharing. So
is it more a discussion, or is
No.
it's a computer class?
It's a class.
Okay.
Right. It could turn into a discussion. I mean, often people who come to a workshop or a seminar or a class like that aren't even aware that when you post a photo that the location might be on it. And that might not be an issue for you, but it could be your grandchild's or your neighbors, and they might not really want the location of where that is. So they're just little issues like that, or what your children are doing. If you're a parent and you're not aware of what's happening with new technology or some kind of new, like what Tumblr is, or any of those kinds of things that you might not know about. So internet safety.
Okay.
That's the first thing. And then this might sound sort of surprising, but we are having a banned book story time for kids because often banned books are most frequently banned in school libraries. or not banned. Maybe the word we should use is challenged. And you can understand that because often in a public library, people somewhat have the expectation that you're going to find all points of view in it. And not that they don't have that expectation in a school, but in a school, the school acts as the parent often. So when you send your child to school, you have this expectation. And so I think that more frequently, at least in the state of Iowa, it's challenges to materials that are in schools. So there are many, many children's books that have been banned in certain libraries, particularly in the past, or at least challenged. And so our children's staff is going to pick one of those or two and read those. And they're fine, wonderful books where the wild things are. Things like,
Where the Wild Things Are has been banned?
It's a fascinating story of books that have been banned and challenged. So
I know like Harry Potter and...
Well, just last year, I have a list from the American Library Association for Banned Books Week. And these are the books, the 10 most challenged titles of 2012. Captain Underpants, number 1, Reasons, Offensive Language, Unsuited for an Age Group. And that's really, I think, why schools and public library children's departments have challenges, because it's not so much maybe even that the parent or the group doesn't want that material in the library, but they don't want a certain age exposed to it. So that was number 1. The second one was The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie. Offensive language, racism, sexually explicit, unsuited for an age group. Let's see where there's another children's one. Number 5 last year, Entangle Makes 3 by Peter Parnell and Justin Richardson. That's the story of the two penguins who are of the same sex, and they have a penguin child, whatever you call a penguin child. And that was banned because of homosexuality, offensive language, religious viewpoint, sexually explicit. So you can see that the reasons that people are objecting may be very heartfelt, but that doesn't mean that they can have it taken away from the library. So, I mean, it's a very interesting topic, and if you've never thought about, somebody might have a different point of view about what they want their child to read.
Yeah.
So we're having a banned book story time.
That'll be interesting. I can't wait to hear what gets chosen.
And then Wednesday night we're showing All the President's Men. It's the 40th anniversary of that film. 40 years ago. It's about Watergate and the suppression of information, so that will be a good one. Thursday, on September 26th at noon, we are having banned poems that built America. And it starts with Walt Whitman and ends with Tupac. And this is an interesting collaboration with the Senior Center, and we'll have a group called Poetry Aloud, and they're senior citizens, wonderful people who've done lots of programming at the Senior Center and are collaborating with us, and they'll be reading poetry. So we're looking forward to that one. Then Thursday night, we're doing something we're doing something we've never done before. So I'm sort of excited about this because I'm not sure how it's going to work. But we try to collaborate as much as we can when the International Writing Program has its scholars in town. So this year, we thought, what can we do with them? And one idea that we tossed around was, well, let's have the scholars who come from countries where their works have been banned and share their works. And so we had a discussion with the people who are responsible for that program, and they said, that's an intriguing idea, and we often have those kinds of questions asked of those scholars because it's just a different world out there. But we really don't want to do a whole program on that. For one thing, it might be disseminated worldwide, and then there could be repercussions for them in their home country, which I thought, I had never thought of that. But just because we don't ban people, well, we try not to, for those kinds of reasons, we don't imprison them. Well, not always. It's certainly less than in a country like Iran or Iraq. So we want to respect what the International Writing Program is doing. So instead, what we're going to try and do, we haven't quite worked out all the details, is something that we're calling, Is This Censorship? And what we're thinking is, during the week of Banned Books Week, we'll have available people to pick up a slip and then to find a book anywhere in the library that they might think, well, I don't like this book, or if I could ban a book, this is a book I would ban, and they could write on that slip of paper and do that. And then we will probably also go through the American Library Association's list of the banned books for the last 10 years, ban those books, and then have the international writing scholars come in and ban their own books, ban them, and then have a discussion that night. So Thursday night, we want to talk about what is censorship and why does censorship happen, sort of like the questions that you and I are just having now. I mean, why would a children's book ever be banned? Well, why would any book ever be banned? Like 50 Shades of Grey, that's number 4 on the banned books list. That's a book for adults that's, most people that we talk to here at the library, it was extremely popular, still continues to be popular. We have many copies of it. They don't like it because they don't think the writing is very good, but we don't ban books because we don't think the writing is very good. Some people don't want it in their library because it's sexually explicit or it has offensive language. So all sorts of things. So this is kind of an experiment for us, and we're going to see what happens with our
so the slips of paper will go in the books?
around the books or on the spine of the book. We're not quite sure.
So as people are walking through, they can see just the banned books down the aisles.
And then maybe, well, what we hope is that it will be provocative and we'll get them to think about that, because that's really what we are doing Intellectual Freedom Festival for, is to get people to think about the freedoms that we have, why they're so important, and discuss, well, if a book were to be banned, what reason would there be for that? So that's a new thing. We've never done that before, so we're sort of excited about that. And then we're very excited about an event we're doing on Friday night, and we're showing a film, a documentary called Far Out Isn't Far Enough, the Tommy Ungerer story. And Tommy Ungerer is a children's author. We have many, many, many of his books in the children's room. It was very well a celebrated children's author. The documentary is about what happened to him when he continued to do his children's writing and illustration, but he also verged into more graphic adult illustration. And all of his works were then banned and pulled from American libraries.
Including his children's books?
Everything. So he left the United States, relocated to Ireland, and continued to do exactly what he did before. And then the time and the climate has changed. And so all of his books are back in American libraries. He's still a celebrated children's illustrator. But that's an example of how times change and what we accept as, what we find acceptable and not acceptable. So if we're able to categorize, if a children's illustrator does children's illustrations and writes children's books, but he also does adult graphic things, there's two separate entities entirely. And so just because one thing happens doesn't mean that his book should be banned. So this is it's going to be a very interesting screening. It's a brand new documentary. I think this might be the first time it's shown in Iowa. A professor at the University of Iowa School of Library Science who specializes in children's literature will do an introduction to that film, and she'll talk about children's materials and censorship. She won't particularly talk about Tommy Ungerer because the whole documentary is about him, but the whole history of children's materials and censorship, because it's fascinating and it continues to take place. I mean, #1 book, Captain Underpants, it's not like people are not interested in what materials their children read. So we're really looking forward to that. So those are our activities during Intellectual Freedom Festival.
So what happens at each of these events?
Well, mostly it's just sharing of information. You're either watching someone perform, so the Poetry Out Loud, those will be the Senior Center Poetry Out Loud people doing the poetry from Whitman to Tupac, or the movies will be a screening of a movie. The last one, the one about Tommy Ungerer, will have an introduction by the School of Library and Information Science Children's Library, children's material specialist. The Children's Story Hour is a story, and they always do fun little finger plays and songs, and so there'll be songs that go along with that. But we also are giving away this year a cup, a banned book week cup from the American Library Association, and it's got all sorts of interesting books that have been banned on it. Animal Farm, Naked Lunch, Catcher in the Rye, Lolita, Tropic of Cancer, The Satanic Verses. So each event that we have will have a drawing, and someone will win this cup. We also sell, I forgot to say this, every year the American Library Association and the other organizations have buttons or pins for Banned Books Week. And they're always pretty interesting and colorful and provocative. And people, if you get a button, people will say, oh, So another thing that makes people think. So those will be for sale at the help desk. But these one will be given away free.
Great.
Yep. And we'll also have a display of banned materials, which will be interesting because people will come in and they'll say, well, why would anybody ban that? You know, the Bible is often banned in places. Huck Finn is banned, Little Black Sambo, things that you can sort of understand might be banned because they had an image of something that we no longer find acceptable, or they use words that we no longer find acceptable. But then is the content bad because there's one or two things in it that we don't like? So
Where will that display be?
I think it will be both on the first floor and the second floor. And we hope with is this censorship where we're allowing people to put bans or spine labels on books, that will be all over the library. Because certainly the nonfiction collection has things that people don't agree with, and it has probably materials in there that people don't agree with, as well as the fiction collection and the children's materials. I mean, somebody might just come in and say, I don't like this author, I've never liked him, so I'm going to ban him. And then we can say, well, is that a good reason to ban something? So
It could be a really fun, interactive sort of
that's what we hope.
exercise.
Yeah,
With the whole community.
we hope to. And I think it's particularly with everything that's happened with the National Security Agency and WikiLeaks and Julian Assange, that these are topics that we need to discuss. And what better forum than a public library where we have public meeting rooms. Our meeting rooms are very, very busy because they're free and they're an open forum.
And so most of your events will be in the meeting rooms?
Meeting room A.
Okay, great.
Our goal is to have a number of people there and have a lively and provocative,
and
we
it's
hope.
open to the public.
Oh, that's the whole purpose of it. Open to the
Okay.
public.
Can you tell me a little bit about how this focus on intellectual freedom falls into the library's mission?
Well, our mission is to educate, to provide an educational forum, to provide entertainment, to act as a community center. And what better means as a community center than to allow people to freely express their opinions and to share ideas that may make other people uncomfortable or that they may agree with, but it's a public forum, and we really are in the middle of the downtown area of Iowa City, and we're certainly a gathering place. I think our library is still the busiest public library in the state of Iowa. We have a lot of traffic here. We live in a very diverse community for Iowa. There's a lot of fascinating things going on, and I think it's a perfect role for the Iowa City Public Library. Intellectual freedom isn't just during Intellectual Freedom Festival, it's the whole year round. But this is the time that we've chosen to celebrate it and maybe do a little bit of education about how important it is and what a fundamental part it is of a democracy, that you can share your opinion, you can share viewpoints, and maybe more importantly that you can learn other people's viewpoints and what they have to say.
Great.
And read and watch.
Thank you so much for talking with me today, Maeve.
Thank you. That you can learn other people's viewpoints and what they have to say.
Great.
And read and watch.
Thank you so much for talking with me today, Maeve.
Thank you.